if you're a big fan of the Sixers, how concerned are you by what we saw with a guy who has a history of not playing big in big games in what we saw last night? He's speechless. He's absolutely stunned. I think that what happened there is Perk is so taken away by the performance of James Harden, and obviously also doesn't have the ability to hear me yet. Zach, I'll ask you the same question. How worried are you if you're a Sixer fan this morning?
I'm not that worried because it's just the regular season, but he does have a history of, like, when it's easy and the team's rolling and I'm up 10 in Detroit or Orlando or in game one of a playoff series, everything's great. The step back's flowing. He's got the pop in his step. When it gets hard, and it was clear right away last night that Nets were going to make this hard, it just doesn't seem like he's as engaged in the game. The moment it gets hard, there's just a little bit of a retreat, and we've seen that movie before, and they can't afford to have him see it again. Like I said before, no one in the NBA is under more pressure in these playoffs than James Harden.
Well, so Zach, Monica and I are going to yell at you again as we did in our first hour. What do you mean you're not that concerned? How could you not be that concerned about James Harden after last night, considering his history?
Because it's one game. I know the history. It's game 6 for him in Philadelphia. I'm not going to overreact too much to a regular season game, but the moment I see this in the playoffs, and maybe this portends that, then I will react accordingly. But right now, it's still they're 5-1 with Harden. They've been dominant with Harden and Embiid. They didn't have a couple of players that they're going to need last night, including Danny Green, who's a sneaky big part of their team. So I'm not. Maxey didn't have a big game. Like, a lot of things went wrong last night for the Sixers.
I'm told that we have Big Perk back, so let me come to you. Big Perk, if you're a Philadelphia fan, and I'll remind everyone again that you played with James Harden when he was a very young player, so you know him really well. How concerned should the fans in Philly be based on his history and last night's performance?
I mean, you should have some level of concern, but I wouldn't overreact. Look, this is just a humbling situation for them. And here's the thing that they have to realize, that we have been talking about all the MVPs and mentioning Ja Morant, DeMar DeRozan, Embiid, and Jokic, but they actually faced the best basketball player in the world last night in Kevin Durant. And I think it's not a debate. But as far as James Harden, like, he's a guy that have these moments. But I would not lose confidence in a guy that has led the league in scoring for 3 years. I would not lose confidence in one of the most prolific scorers to ever touch the damn basketball. And we know that James Harden will bounce back. It's just that last night he didn't know that Kyrie Irving was going to be at him like that, and he wasn't ready for the moment.
Why would that be?
Why would he not expect that? You got to help me with that, Perk, because why would he not expect that? Please, because I don't understand how you're not prepared.
Well, let me explain something to you. Sometimes as a player, like we talked about the emotions of Ben Simmons, it was some emotions of James Harden, and it can either go all the way right or all the way left. Like, do you think that James Harden didn't make any excuses in his post-game interview, which he couldn't? But do you think for 1 second that he didn't have emotions? Or did you think for 1 second that he didn't want to just get this first game out the way as well? Now, I'm not making an excuse. He didn't show up last night. But what I'm saying is, if we are seriously going to sit up here and say that we expect this James Harden for the remainder of the season and in the postseason, we all are fooling ourselves. Like, he will bounce back. Like, he will have better games. He will play better if they played against the Brooklyn Nets. Like, I'm not just about to sit up here and say, oh, James Harden is going to be a no-show. Like, I'm not going to do that.
I hear what you're saying, and here's why I disagree. Because for this team, it is championship or bust. If this team doesn't beat the Nets in a series if they play each other, if they don't beat Milwaukee or Miami or whoever it is, if they don't wind up in the NBA Finals, then this was a failure. So it's not about him bouncing back and having good games. I get that he's going to have good games. But Kevin Durant showed up to play last night. Kyrie showed up to play last night. Embiid showed up. He didn't play well, but he showed up and looked like he was ready for somebody. And Harden looked like this game was just kind of in the way of something else he'd rather be doing. And we've seen that far too many times,
I
Monica.
love the way you described that, Greeny, because I think you nailed it. And you're right. Organizationally, it's championship or bust. But, Zach, you said it. This is the most pressure and the most eyeballs that have been on James Harden because of how he wound up with the Philadelphia 76ers. Perk, I get you. Emotions make us do interesting things. But this, to me, was not the way to handle that, journey of processing the trade and so on and so forth. The disinterest is problematic. Has he been terrific historically in the regular season? 100%. But even you know that when the lights get brighter and we've gone to playoff mode, there have always been questions around James Harden's ability to show up. And last night, all that did was bring all those skeletons out the closet.
Yeah, and that's fine. We all have skeletons, but the thing is, I've seen James Harden bounce back from games like this.
They
like
play
I've
Orlando.
seen
He
him
better bounce back.
Bounce back.
That's the next game.
But listen, I'm talking about in the postseason. Like, I didn't watch James Harden have horrible nights and then bounce back the next day, Monica. And if you want to sit down and mark this day down when the postseason start, let's revisit this conversation and talk about the James Harden that we're going to see in the postseason.
We can absolutely revisit it, but I don't want to talk about a game 1 or 2. I want to talk about a game 5, 6, or 7. Let's have that conversation.
Let me give Zach the final word on this. Go.
She's right, because James Harden's best playoff games, I went back and looked at all of them, all his biggest clutch games, all his best playoff games, all his best last 5 minutes, they've typically been down 3-0 in a playoff series. Game 1, what's the signature moment of James Harden's playoff career? Does he have one since the shot against the Spurs in 2012? I don't know. And to your point, Monica, you said before, he wasn't prepared for Kyrie Irving, or somebody, Perk said he wasn't prepared for Kyrie Irving's defense. That's fine. Kyrie Irving doesn't defend like that all the time. I'm more concerned with how did he respond when that reality hit him in the face, and he didn't respond.
All right, Perk, I'll give you the final word. Go.
No, see, listen, I was on the team with James Harden when we went to the finals. I watched James Harden go for 24 points in the fourth quarter to close out the Dallas Mavericks, who was the defending champions. I watched James Harden on the road against the San Antonio Spurs in the Game 5 take over the game with KD and Russell Westbrook on the floor. Again, I'm not going to doubt James Harden. I was right there in those moments.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.